Is going to talk about the Trustable Software Framework, which is one of the newest open source projects, and is gonna also make some ties with the maturity badges that have been developed.
Oh, you're hoping for that, aren't you?
I do.
I'm not going to mention maturity badges very much, but
That's fine. Well, then I will cry, but only a little.
right. Before I do this talk, who has already seen my FOSDEM talk? Okay, not half. So I am justified in using most of the same slides again. So bear with me. Right. So a new way to measure risk in continuous delivery of critical software. So this is not just about automotive. It's not just about open source even. This is a ridiculously ambitious attempt to change the world. Okay. As you will see, I've got a lot of grievances, and I'm going to air them today. So before I start, CodeThink is a well-established player in automotive. We're a small player, about 130 people. But certainly the OEMs that are involved in this initiative have already worked with CodeThink successfully. We are trusted by big organizations, not just in automotive, when their software projects get into difficulty, for example. So we are kind of known to be great at figuring out why projects are late, why the software is not working, troubleshooting, that kind of thing. So we are trusted across the automotive industry in general. And then there are some companies that hate our guts because we call bullshit on their code. This is a question that we've kind of been worrying about for a long time. Why do you trust software at all? And this line on the bottom here is how you install Rust. And that command basically hands over your computer to this random script from the internet. Now, Rust is a very safety-conscious community, I would say, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of trust built up by that community. They've earned the trust. So most developers will trust that command line. Lots of software gets installed that way, but you are literally surrendering to the community. You're just running some random script from the internet. So why do you trust that? Now, I'm going to skip fast through some of this. The reason CodeThink got involved in safety at all, I've managed to have quite a long career. You can probably see the lack of hair. Avoiding safety entirely because I thought it was boring. But one of our customers, Ulrich Kirsken, in fact, in Bosch, asked us in 2016 how open source and safety could interact. And the answer that came back from his own colleagues when we went and surveyed some of the Bosch people was, well, you're wasting your time. You can't use open source in safety. And the reasons broadly boil down to it doesn't comply with the standards, it doesn't have requirements, it doesn't have an architecture often, there's no traceability, so this quality is not acceptable, and therefore it is literally not possible to consider open source for functional safety. Ironically, the guy that told me this most directly was still using open source for all of his CI infrastructure. So he was trusting that, but not trusting it in his target. Very odd. This has caused me and my colleagues to engage in lots of arguments and constructive discussions with people in the safety community as well as the open source community. And I would say, just for reference, I know I sound like I'm really hard hitting here. I'm speaking plainly and who the hell is this guy? Well, I've been fighting this kind of topic for a long time. And who can still spell Geneva? Right? In 2012, 2013, I was explaining to Geneva that security is an actual problem and that LTS maintenance of Linux is neither long-term nor stable as far as automotive is concerned. And everybody in the room for the silicon vendors at the time laughed at me and told me that security was not an issue, right? So believe me when I say I do believe I can see what's going to happen here based on what happened in Geneva, unless we get our shit together. So safety is not certification. That's the first thing we learned. And functional safety is not safety. There's some overlap, but safety is a bigger topic than what the functional safety community has come to understand. These days, if we can't deal with security as well, what use is your safety argument, right? If you can't take the update to fix the critical security flaw, how do you think you're going to stay safe? So there's a bigger problem that is outside of the scope of the standards as they sit. And then if we think about what our customers and some of you, and well, in fact, most of the people in this room will be thinking about, safety is only one part of what we've got to deal with. Most OEMs are looking at multi-billion-dollar commitments every time they do an SOP, right? Who here really believes that safety is being properly considered on every single one of those projects right at the death when the software doesn't work, right? So let's get real about what actually happens. Now, the standards, all of this stuff is proprietary, and we're in an open source community here discussing in the open, right? So I have to be relatively fearless because people are taking pictures, my slides are already on the internet, and I'm known to be quite a belligerent guy. So we are trying, from CodeThink's perspective, and I've managed to convince enough Eclipse people, well, actually it wasn't me, I think it was John Ellis did most of the convincing, but there are enough Eclipse people understanding that there is a possibility, a small possibility perhaps, but a possibility of breaking the doors open on this thing and having a new open source standard that deals with the problems that are supposedly addressed by the functional safety standards and some of the security stuff. I know that it's ridiculous to try to have another standard because all the other standards are failing, and I'm proving that I understand it by showing the cartoon, but still, we're going to try. And part of the reason is, it is absolutely offensive that people have to spend nearly $5,000 to understand the core safety standard and $1,500 to understand the automotive safety standard. This is safety, for heaven's sake. Why are engineers supposed to pay for this stuff? The irony is, all of this work was done by safety experts for free, and then you've got an organization just exploiting that work behind a paywall, right? And from an open source point of view, all of the contributors here should be seething about that and excited about the possibility of having something that's actually open. So just to take one example, there's loads of good work in 26262, there's loads of good work in 61508, but to give you one example why we cannot spend any significant time at CodeThink trying to figure out how to comply with 26262 is that it does not believe that there's any possibility of random behavior in software. So the idea, if you follow all of the 26262 principles, you will get deterministic software. Well, good luck with that on a multi-core microprocessor, which is the game that we're playing. So you will need to consider random failures, and the standard makes no allowance for that. So I'm going to skip through this because to get to this. How many people in the world are still using the V model? Maybe it's just the automotive industry. Maybe it's just the automotive industry and the aerospace industry. But most software, I would guess 90-something% of the software in the world is either open source or agile or both. Agile, for some inverted commas value of what agile ever meant. I'm old enough to remember life before the Agile Manifesto, and I wrote a document called the Software Commandments in the same year that they wrote that. And if you compare the Software Commandments versus the Agile Manifesto, I'm still prouder of mine than their work. And that's on CodeThink's website if you want to check it out. So the trouble with this determinism idea is that it means that the process that's required is supposed to be perfect. You get your spec right, you get your architecture right, you code it right, you test it right, and then because you've done all of that right, you've got something that absolutely only does what you think it does. Again, that's not the world we live in. But the trouble is, because that process stuff is fundamental to the standard, it means that, in effect, you have to either have already complied with that, or you have to comply with it now, so you're going to be developing from scratch. So we're in this plainly ridiculous idea that instead of using software which is good enough for our banking systems, and good enough for all of the critical infrastructure in many industries, instead of using that, we're going to write it all from scratch, which strikes me as nonsense. So just to ram it home, this is the quote from The Wizard of Oz. We are not in the world that 26262 describes. We are not in deterministic software. So we are talking about multi-core microprocessors. One of our customers is over here with 16, count them, 16 NVIDIA multi-core microprocessors in a single vehicle, right? Please don't tell me that any amount of process is going to guarantee that the behavior of that system is fully understood. Oh, and they've got AI in it as well. So,
that's sweet. Can you tell me the brand?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not telling you what kind of vehicle it is either. Right, so we believe that we're going to have to deal with random faults, so we're going to need statistical processes, not just because of the software, but because of the hardware as well. But then we do have to take seriously what the standard says, and it all boils down to reducing the failure rate, really. Everything, all of this process, whatever you think you're doing about safety, it's about trying to avoid dangerous failures. And that is a very hard target. Now, as I understand it, and there may be some people in this room or some people who see the video later and say, no, Paul, there are other ways to justify this. Those numbers were evolved by people in aerospace specifically to justify level of attention on safety for fleets of aircraft. And they end up grandfathered into the standards, and people use them as a generic target, even though they don't necessarily apply to specific industries. No one here is going to be around in 1,000 years still testing. No one, as far as I know, is actually able to defend this target. But you get the pass, you get the certificate. If you comply with the standard, you don't need to hit the target. Right? That seems like an odd game to me as well. So I started this argument in 2016, right? So obviously I apologize for taking so long, and there's still a long way to go, right? We are by no means there yet, but I'm not giving up, my colleagues are not giving up, and we are starting to have more evidence to support our argument that things have to change. So key lesson from all of the early discussions was you need evidence if you want to be trusted with software. There's a whole lot of work that is still there in public if you want to review and see how naive we were when we started this journey. But now let's go for the Trustable Software Framework. So trustable as opposed to trusted. The idea is you provide evidence, and then someone that's receiving the software can decide whether they want to trust it based on the evidence. And they can review the evidence, they can dig into the software as well and draw a conclusion as to whether they should trust it. So we joined Eclipse, you know that. This is the core 6 ideas, the map of the territory, so to speak. Do I really only have 3 minutes left? How on earth did I get shortchanged like this? Well, okay, so you can watch the rest of most of the talk. I'm going to hit time. I'm not going to go into detail, but I will skim through and show you a couple of slides that are new. So this is just explaining what the map looks like. But then what we've been doing in private, and we will open source this part in due course once we get to the point where we can defend it. We've taken the Trustable Software Framework as is in public, and then we've done a mapping for the IEC 61508 standard. And the reason we're using 61508 is because it does allow for the possibility of random failures in software, which is the world we should be in, right? And moreover, working with Exeter, they have assured us that provided we are appropriately complying with 61508, there is a straightforward way to map what we're doing to demonstrate it's compliant with the spirit of 26262, right? So, in effect, the mapping the safety manual part of 61508 leads us to an additional section in the Trustable Software Framework. Safety requirements specification leads us to adding a few more. These slides will be public. You don't need to take pictures, but you can. Get my smiling face on my shirt. Right, so freedom from interference, which is everyone's bugbear topic. How on earth do you ensure freedom from interference? So we end up with some more boxes there. The idea in general is that using the Trustable Software Framework, you can measure the project's ability to comply with specific things. And in effect, you can map any standard, if you choose to, into this kind of approach. And then it gives you just a simple framework for doing traceability, which is one of the things the standards require. But the difference is we're trying to score things. So you can actually gauge confidence in each of these topic areas, right? And what we're aiming at is the equivalent of a credit score, but for software, right? I'm not going to tell you what the number is on mine, right? But I'm quite happy with my credit score. So we have a public worked example. Probably too little too late for Daniel, who's about to talk about what a pain in the arse it is actually to do the Trustable Software Framework next. But the Safety Monitor is a small open source project that we've created, which is part of our larger work to demonstrate how to make a safety relevant Linux-based operating system. So we're now beating our engineers in public until they up the scores, kind of thing. So you can watch that drama play out over the next year or so. So they have actually raised one of the scores above 0. So it's, yeah, I've already said that. But here's new stuff. So this is where we're actually scored in terms of our Linux-based operating system right now. Those are not very high scores. but I'm confident that they are lower than the actual quality of the software, because basically we've been building up our evidence in advance of plumbing all of the evidence into the Trustable Software Framework. So part of the work here is automating the collection of data to support each of these concepts, right? So in effect, anyone that's used to CI/CD, that's where we're going. So all we're doing is gathering data that we then use as a basis for deriving a confidence score. Now I'm going to throw the cat among the pigeons because of the last questions that were asked. There were two questions. One was about the process stuff, and one was about what the contributors care about. So can I deal with that question first? Why the contributors should care. This is not trying to enforce a safety process on open source software projects. It's trying to recognize the quality of open source and say, there must be a way for us to raise our confidence based on measuring the results that the open source project's achieving. So hopefully, for well-organized projects that are delivering extremely high quality software, which is what would be required to be considered in a safety critical environment, it's not a huge amount of rework because people are already doing sensible things. And those sensible things may overlap with the standards, but they're not the same. Because I would clearly argue that some things that we need to do on all of the automotive projects we work on are not in the safety standard, right? So we're trying to figure out what is sensible in 2025 and onwards for software, complex software at scale. And then the question about the standards, about the processes here, I have to say, I'm a bit worried. We're going to have 3 different workshops in the morning. One's going to be about SIG process group, one's going to be about Trustable Software Framework, and one's going to be about score process, I think, which is disastrous, frankly. So I would much prefer that all 3 processes at least try to figure out how to collaborate, because otherwise, we're just building silos from day one. So I don't really believe that Eclipse SDV can win if we dick around, right? I'm old enough to have spent, I think, 6 years in Geneva, and eventually I just left in dismay because it was pathetic, right? Now, I don't want to have to leave this in dismay, but I will, right? So we've got to get serious. I do understand the need of the OEMs to get this to work. I also understand the needs of the contributors to feel like they're contributing something valuable, right? If we do this right, there should be benefits outside of automotive. There should be a lot of things that come from SCORE and come from this group that should be reusable more widely. We should be able to cause more open source projects to recognize the need to demonstrate their quality, right? So this is a much bigger ask for all of you to think about. And I'll stop there. Oh, sorry, no, I won't. There's my kick in the teeth. That's our safety assessment as of 2 weeks ago. I'll take that off. Questions? Oh, I've run out of time. I'm sorry, I can't take any. No, stunned silence. Go for it, John.
Well, I know you work. Oh, all right. Yeah, good. Well, I know you work closely with Exeter, for example.
Yes.
What's the level of engagement with other?
That's their words.
Well, that you work closely with them.
No.
Oh, no. I realise that.
Oh,
No, I get it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The words you took off the screen very quickly. Yeah.
Yes.
No, got it. What's your level of engagement with other certification authorities, especially those that also work closely with automotive?
0. We're a tiny company.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So
you're 130 people. What are you all doing?
Say again?
No, I said you're 130 people. What are you all doing? I'm kidding.
Yes, quite. So we looked into contact with Jonathan Moore at Exeter in 2017, I think it was, and managed to get him interested in the Trustable Software project as it was at that time. So he contributed. I think that was his first actual open source contributions, explaining how 1 out of 2 and 2 out of 2 worked, kind of thing. And we've been very happy with Exeter most of the time through then. We've had lots of arguments at times as we've tried to convince them that some of what they've understood for safety is not relevant anymore for software. So
I was thinking in particular of the TÜV organizations and such like.
We've had literally no contact so far, but obviously our hope is that we can build more of a community. So we're actively trying to encourage Exeter to be more visible in this community, because obviously they're supporting ESCOR, and in fact some of the same people at Exeter have been working with the ESCOR team as are working with us. So if we could get Exeter and TUV people contributing, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, you know, I believe in the approach. I was just wondering if the people at Exciter that you work with,
Yep.
they do seem to believe in the approach.
Yes.
I was just wondering, is it fair to say that the rest of Exciter will do so as well, or the rest of the auditing business?
Well, I believe so. I mean, the ESCOR project assessment, I think, involved Alex Egerer, who is one of the key assessors at Exeter. He's also been involved in our assessment, right? So one of the things that I like about Exeter is there are people there who realize that we're kind of at this watershed and things need to change. So they are being forward thinking, which is why they've engaged with ESCOR, and why they're, you know, if you look at the LinkedIn.
So if I go to TÜV Süd, will they agree?
I can't comment for TÜV because I don't know any of the people there. But in the end, I think what we're trying to do is worthwhile, isn't it? We need to get this safety stuff out from under the proprietary so that a lot more engineers can think about what matters. So why wouldn't they?
Don't get me started.
Other questions?
Yeah, don't be shy. I'm not.
So there's gonna be time tomorrow, right?
You did hear my request that we somehow merge, and I think I got support. We should try to merge the work streams. We can't afford to have 3 separate discussions about process. Okay, cool, good.
As far as I understood you, Paul, is that your assessment if software is trustable or not is something which is an ongoing activity. I'm
Totally.
not just doing it once and then it's done, but I need to regularly do that.
Yes.
What are the events triggering reassessment is what I'm interested in. And
Right.
is the entire world able to do that without the help of CodeSync, or are you required in each of the assessments?
Well, lots of people deliver critical systems without CodeLink. You know, we're a tiny company. We have a small number of customers. There's nothing that we're laying down here that's proprietary to CodeLink, right? We're doing a huge amount of work on a Linux-based operating system because that's what our customers have said they need from us, right? And we're thinking about which parts of that work we can open, right? So we're actually right now considering whether we can have a fully open Linux distro as a basis for this work. But yeah, the idea that it's going to need ongoing assessment is unavoidable, right? And anyone that thinks the old idea of we get assessment over 3 months and then they bless this software, well, by the time they blessed it, the software that's going into the vehicle is a completely different version. So it's ridiculous, right? So assessment needs to happen at minimum every single time a release happens. And then if we think about security situations, the actual use case is, oh, shit, we have a vulnerability, we need to patch it. We can see that there's an upstream patch. The embargo is going to be taken off in a couple of days' time. How do we get that into our vehicles in 2 days' time, right? So the discussion we've had with Exeter around that, part of I would say at least some of the people at Exeter are already excited about this way of thinking because they can see the possibility of just being plumbed into an API, in effect, that allows them to check the evidence in the large for the project and then just do repeated, much smaller checks against what changes, right? So the world is going to have to go this way. Whether CodeThink does it or not is irrelevant, I would say.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also have a question. I had a look at the Trustable Software Framework.
Okay.
And you mentioned also on your slide that it's for existing projects. So I'm working for the Ankaios project, and we already have requirements where we used the open fast trace tooling for that. And when I looked at the Trustable Software Framework, and I thought, can that be used with Ankaios together? And it's very much based. You also mentioned the tooling like Doorstop and MKDocs. So we use mkdocs, but we don't use doorstop. And I think much of the tooling is actually related to requirements which are present in doorstop.
Sure.
So if you have an existing project that doesn't use doorstop, then I think there's adoption needed, right?
Yeah. That,
Okay.
well, so obviously the pool of projects that don't use doorstop is infinite, right?
Yeah. Okay.
The pool of projects that don't use doorstop but use a requirements management system is pretty small,
Okay.
right? We're aiming at the overall field, and doorstop, if you're already working on a project which is aiming to be safety critical, your choice of requirements management tooling is really the least of your problems, I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, so I see the tools growing and growing. I mean, of course, every project can choose the best tooling it wants
Sure.
to have, and so we've seen the SCORE project. They decided to have Swings needs. For Ancaios,
know. Yeah.
we decided for open fast trace. I've recently seen a presentation of the Xen project, and they're also going for functional safety, and they're also going to have the requirements in public together with their source code, and they also decided to have open fast trace. So far, I haven't seen a project using doorstop. So, but I think you have quite a history, and there might be other projects. But I think Eclipse SDV, is anyone already using doorstop for that?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I'd be very happy to support someone implementing the Trustable Software Framework in fast trace. It doesn't matter. The tooling is secondary to the principle of we need to collect evidence in all of these areas and we need to score it. Sure.
Okay, so guys, we need to move on. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation.